I was 16 the night my father decided I did not deserve a home, and even now I can still hear the sound that started everything. It was the heavy thud of his boots pounding down the hallway, a sound that always meant trouble. But this time, there was something colder in it, something that made the air in my room feel thin. The door flew open so violently that the knob punched into the wall, and before I could even sit up, he had his hand around my wrist. His grip was so tight it cut into my skin. Behind him stood my sister Megan, her arms folded, her face arranged into that careful expression of innocence she used whenever she wanted to hide the fact that she had started something. Her eyes were bright in a way that made my stomach twist. My father yanked me out of bed, shouting before I could even ask what was happening. "Where is it?" His voice shook the walls thick with alcohol and rage. I told him I did not know what he was talking about, but he dragged me forward with a force that sent me crashing onto the floor. "Do not lie to me. You think I do not know you took it." Megan leaned closer to him and whispered something so soft I could not hear the words, but I saw the moment they landed. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw locked. Whatever she said was enough to push him past the point where anything could be reasoned with. He grabbed my coat from the chair, and for a moment I thought he was going to hand it to me, but instead he ripped it open at the zipper and flung it down the hall as if it offended him. Then he seized the collar of my pajama top. The thin fabric strained, and I stumbled as he jerked me toward the door. I begged him to stop, told him I had no idea what he was looking for, but he pulled me close enough that I could smell the sour mix of alcohol and anger on his breath. "You do not deserve to stay under my roof. You do not deserve anything." Those words hit harder than his hands ever had. Something inside me went quiet. Not numb, not frozen yet, but quiet as if part of me had always known this moment was coming. He dragged me down the stairs, each step a jolt that rattled my spine. Megan followed with slow steps, watching like a spectator at a show she had written herself. At the bottom, he shoved me so hard I slammed against the wall beside the front door. My breath left my body in a sharp gasp. "Open it." His command was cold final. Megan obeyed instantly, her fingers turning the knob with delicate precision, almost graceful, as if she were opening the door for a guest and not sending her own sister into the freezing night. The porch light flickered in the storm. Snow whipped sideways in frantic gusts. The thermometer beside the door read -5 degrees Fahrenheit, a number that looked unreal until the cold reached me. It rushed toward me like a wave. My bare feet curled against the porch boards. The cold was so intense it burned. I turned toward him helplessly. My face must have shown everything I felt, but he did not hesitate. "Get out!" He pushed me through the doorway with both hands. I stumbled onto the porch, the wind slashing through my thin pajamas, each flake of snow stinging like a spark. He shut the door, and I heard the lock click before I even turned back. I pounded on it, calling for him, for anyone inside, but the house stayed silent. The cold bit into my legs, my arms, my face turning each breath into pain. Snow gathered in my hair and melted down my neck. For a moment, I stood there unable to move, frozen by more than the temperature. Then instinct forced me off the porch. The snow swallowed my bare feet with a shock so sharp I cried out, but no one heard me. The nearest place open all night was the convenience store at the edge of town. Half a mile. It felt like an ocean away. I hugged my arms around myself and started walking through the storm. Each step cracked through the crust of ice. My toes throbbed. My legs felt heavy and stiff. The wind pushed against me until it felt like I was walking through water instead of air. My skin burned. My breath came out in frantic clouds. "Do not stop." That small voice inside me repeated it again and again. "If you stop, you die." The world narrowed until all I could see was the blurry glow of the store sign in the distance. The lights inside looked warm, impossibly warm, and I focused on them with everything in me. By the time I reached the parking lot, my lips were numb and my body shook violently. I pulled the door open and nearly fell inside. Warm air hit me like fire. My skin prickled with painful heat. The man behind the counter stared at me with wide eyes as I tried to speak, but my voice came out thin and broken. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and guided me to a chair. "Please do not call the police," I begged him. "If they contact my father, it will be worse." He looked at me for a long second and I saw his face change. He picked up the phone anyway. "Someone did this to you." I tried to stop him, but he had already dialed. Minutes later, sirens echoed through the storm, sharp and rising, slicing through the night like a warning and a promise. That was the night I almost froze to death, and it was the night everything began to change. When people hear the word childhood, they imagine birthday cakes, school plays, summer vacations, and a sense of safety that settles into the bones. My childhood was nothing like that. It felt more like living in a war zone, a place where the danger was inside the walls instead of outside, and where every sound carried a shadow of threat. My father Robert was the kind of man whose anger arrived without warning. One minute he would be sitting in his recliner watching television, and the next he would be on his feet shouting about a glass left on the wrong counter or a door not shut fast enough. The air in our house always felt heavy, like the stillness before a storm. I learned early to move quietly, to measure my breaths, to avoid eye contact when he stomped through the hallway. Every child learns survival in some form, but mine came wrapped in fear. My sister Megan never had to learn it. She was the golden one, the daughter who could do no wrong. If she broke something, she blamed me. If she wanted attention, she cried and said I had started a fight. If she needed sympathy, she twisted her face just right so that my mother would sweep her into her arms and whisper that she was her precious girl. The more Megan lied, the more my parents believed her, until eventually it did not matter what I said. In their eyes, I was the problem, the disruption, the burden they never wanted. My father did not call me by my name unless he was angry, which meant he almost never used my name. Most days he called me girl or you. Sometimes he called me nothing at all, simply pointed, and expected me to understand what task he wanted done. My mother, Linda, was a quieter type of dangerous. She never hit me herself, never raised her voice, never grabbed me the way my father did, but she made sure to disappear emotionally the moment I needed her. Whenever my father hurled accusations at me or Megan staged another performance of victimhood, my mother would sigh dramatically and press her hand to her forehead. "Emily, why do you always cause trouble?" It was a line she repeated so often, I began to hear it even when she was not speaking. The worst part was how she made herself the victim in every situation. If my father screamed at me until I cried, she claimed the noise gave her a headache. If I tried to explain that Megan had set me up again, my mother said she could not handle the stress. If I flinched when my father raised his hand, she said I was making things harder on her. She had an endless talent for turning my suffering into her inconvenience. Megan learned quickly how to weaponize that. She was 2 years older than me and understood the dynamics of the house long before I did. If she wanted a new outfit, she stole money from my mother's purse and blamed me. If she wanted attention, she pretended I had hurt her. If she wanted sympathy, she invented stories that made her look fragile and sweet while painting me as unpredictable or jealous. She knew exactly which buttons to press. My father believed her every time. My mother supported her every time. I was always the one standing there defenseless, waiting for the consequences. Some moments stand out with an edge so sharp I still feel them years later. The night I spilled a cup of milk on the kitchen counter, for instance. It was an accident. My hands were shaking from the cold because the heater had broken again, and my father would not fix it until he felt like it. The glass slipped the milk spread, and the sound of liquid hitting the floor was enough to set him off. He grabbed me by the arm, dragged me into the backyard, and made me stand there without shoes for 15 minutes while he lectured me about wasting food and money. I was 9. I remember staring at the stars, wishing I could step into one of them and disappear. Another time, Megan convinced my father that I had scratched her car door with a key even though I was not old enough to drive and did not have a key to anything. He grounded me for 2 weeks. I did her chores. She went to a party. My mother said nothing. She rarely did. There were smaller moments, too. The way Megan would take the biggest slice of cake and leave me the crumbs. The way my father would brag about Megan's achievements at family gatherings but pretend I did not exist. The way my mother kept a photo album dedicated entirely to Megan and none of me. Even birthdays became minefields. One year, my father bought Megan a gold necklace and handed me a set of dollar store crayons. He laughed when he saw my face fall. What? You think you deserve the same thing she does? That was the rhythm of our home. Megan destroyed. I was blamed. My father punished. My mother sighed. Over and over. It never changed. And somewhere between the shouting, the accusations, the slammed doors, and the endless nights lying awake listening for footsteps outside my room, I began to accept a terrible belief. I started to believe that maybe I really was less valuable, less wanted, less loved. That belief settled into me like dust on old furniture, quiet, unnoticed, but impossible to remove. It shaped the way I walked, the way I breathed, the way I spoke. I became careful, too careful. I watched the floor more than the people in front of me. I apologized for things I did not do. I held my breath when my father opened his mouth. I never felt safe. Not once. Not in 16 years. That was why the night he threw me into the snow did not feel like a sudden tragedy. It felt like the final chapter of a story that had been writing itself for as long as I could remember. It was the moment the truth became undeniable. In that house, I had never been a daughter. I had always been a target. If my childhood felt like living in a war zone, then Aunt Mary was the only ceasefire I ever knew. She was my mother's younger sister, but you would never have guessed they were related. Where my mother moved like a shadow, trying not to disturb anything, Aunt Mary moved like she belonged everywhere she stepped. She had a warm laugh that filled a room, eyes that seemed to read everything without judgment, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like a person instead of a burden. I remember the first time she visited after months of being away. I must have been 8. She walked through the front door with a bag of books, a plate of chocolate chip cookies she had baked herself, and a bright scarf wrapped around her hair. My father's face soured immediately, as if her presence alone pushed oxygen out of the house. Megan watched her with suspicion. I stood there quietly waiting to be told to leave the room. Instead, Aunt Mary knelt in front of me and smiled. "I brought you something." She handed me a hardcover copy of a children's mystery novel. I ran my fingers over the cover, stunned. No one ever gave me gifts without expecting something in return. My father grumbled that she was spoiling me. My mother muttered something about me not needing distractions when there was work to do. Megan rolled her eyes and said she wished she had an aunt who brought her things, but Aunt Mary ignored them and focused on me with gentle steadiness. Stories help you escape when life feels heavy. I did not understand what she meant then, but I would later. When she visited, she paid attention in a way that felt radical. She asked what I liked, what I feared, what I hoped for. She listened. In our house, listening was rare. Most days, she stayed only a few hours, but in those hours, the atmosphere changed. The air felt lighter. My shoulders relaxed without me meaning to. I laughed, sometimes quietly, afraid to let it be too loud. She would sit with me at the kitchen table and help with homework, praising me in small ways that made my heart ache because I wanted so desperately to believe her. My father watched us like a storm cloud waiting to break. He did not like any part of it. He made little comments under his breath, asked Aunt Mary why she insisted on interfering with his parenting, reminded her that we were not her responsibility. Aunt Mary held her ground. She had a calm fire in her that he could not extinguish, no matter how he tried. Whenever he raised his voice at her, she stared straight back with quiet confidence. "Robert," she would say, lowering her voice but not her gaze. "You cannot scream a truth into existence just because you want it to be true." My father hated that. He hated anyone who saw through him, and she saw through him completely. That was why he tried to limit her visits. He told my mother that Aunt Mary was filling my head with ideas, acting like she knew better. My mother nodded, agreeing with him, though she never tried to stop her sister directly. But Aunt Mary was not easily pushed away. Whenever she sensed I was struggling more than usual, she found a reason to drop by. A forgotten birthday present, extra leftovers, a new book she thought I would enjoy. Every time she appeared, Megan instantly turned cold. She would hover near my father, whispering things under her breath, trying to align herself with him. Megan craved power in the house, and Aunt Mary disrupted the balance she relied on. She hated that Aunt Mary saw me and questioned the way I was treated. She hated even more that Aunt Mary was right. Over the years, Aunt Mary became the only adult who treated me with consistent kindness. She was not perfect. She could not save me from everything. She could not erase the bruises or stop the shouting or fix my mother's silence. But she gave me something my house never had: warmth. When she brushed my hair behind my ear or squeezed my hand before leaving, I felt it long after she walked out the door. She gave me clothes when mine became too small, always passing them off as things she no longer needed instead of charity. She bought me sketchbooks when she noticed I liked to draw. She smuggled snacks into my backpack when Megan had taken mine from the pantry. She did not lecture or pity me. She simply supported me in small ways that created cracks of light in a very dark place. As I got older, she started telling me things more directly. "Emily, there is nothing wrong with you. Do you hear me? There is something wrong with the way you are being treated." Those words felt illegal in my house. My father believed he was unquestionable. My mother believed suffering was something to endure silently. Megan believed she deserved every good thing simply because she wanted it. But Aunt Mary believed in me. Even when I doubted myself, she did not. And on one visit, when she noticed I had grown quieter than usual, she leaned close and lowered her voice. "One day you will get out of this house, and when you do, you will not look back." I remember freezing when she said that. Leaving seemed impossible. The world outside felt as hostile as the world inside, and I had no power, no voice, no rights my father would acknowledge. Still, something in her tone made me believe her. Even if only a little, even if only for a moment. It was the first time I imagined a life where breathing did not hurt. A life where I was allowed to exist without apology. I held on to that promise in the years that followed. I did not know then how prophetic her words would become, or how violently the moment of escape would arrive. All I knew was that in a house filled with darkness, Aunt Mary was the only candle that refused to go out. The night everything began to unravel started quietly the way disasters often do. There was no shouting at first, no slammed doors, no warning signs drifting through the house like smoke. It began with my father opening the drawer of the cabinet where he kept his most prized possession, a vintage silver pocket watch that had belonged to his father, and according to him was worth both sentimental and financial value. He cleaned it every Sunday, held it up to the light as if it were holy, and kept it locked in a small velvet-lined box. He told everyone who visited that one day Megan would inherit it because she was the child who appreciated tradition and family. I never understood how he reached that conclusion, considering she barely knew the difference between a minute hand and an hour hand, but Megan always nodded with a sweet smile whenever he said it. That watch was more than an object to him. It was a symbol, a trophy, a piece of proof that he came from something respectable, which meant losing it was unforgivable. I did not know it was missing until I heard the heavy creak of the cabinet door from upstairs. I was sitting at my desk finishing a math worksheet while Megan painted her nails on her bed across the room. She kept glancing at her phone with a nervous energy that immediately put me on edge. She was too quiet, too focused on not looking at me. When my father's voice boomed through the hallway a moment later, Megan straightened abruptly and tucked something under her pillow so fast I barely noticed the movement. Then she put on her practiced expression of startled innocence, the one she had used since childhood, the one that had cost me so much. My father's footsteps thundered up the stairs and stopped right outside our door. He flung it open in a single violent motion. The veins in his neck were raised. His face was already flushed with anger, like he had sprinted up the steps fueled entirely by rage. His eyes locked on mine instantly. "Where is it?" His words cracked through the air like a whip. I blinked, confused. "Where is what?" "The watch." His voice dropped lower, darker. "Do not play dumb with me. You know exactly what I am talking about." Megan stepped back slightly, positioning herself just out of reach, close enough to observe, but far enough to appear uninvolved. She glanced at me with a flicker of triumph shining beneath her fake worry. I felt my stomach twist. I told him I had not touched anything of his. He took 2 steps toward me and grabbed my shoulder so tightly I gasped. He dragged me past Megan, who pressed herself against the wall in a show of fear that I knew instantly was meant to frame me as unstable. He marched me to his office at the end of the hall and pointed toward the open drawer. The velvet box inside was empty. The watch was gone. "Did you take it?" His voice trembled with a rage that was seconds away from exploding. I shook my head. "I never go in your office. I am not allowed in here, remember." He ignored that. He searched my face like he was waiting to find guilt hidden beneath my skin. Something ugly twisted inside him when he did not find it. Megan appeared in the doorway at that precise moment, wringing her hands in false distress. "Dad!" Maybe she did not mean to lose it. Sometimes she gets overwhelmed. The implication was subtle, designed to sound compassionate while planting the idea that I was unstable or reckless. It worked exactly as she intended. My father turned back to me. "Tell me what you did with it." I repeated that I had not touched it, that I did not even know the combination to the drawer. Megan stepped closer and spoke softly, as if she were trying to protect me. "Dad, last week I saw her coming out of your office. Maybe she was just curious." My jaw dropped. That week I had barely left my room except to go to school. She had been out with friends most evenings. Her lie was smooth, effortless, practiced. My father's eyes narrowed. He asked if it was true. I said no. Megan kept her gaze lowered as if she were reluctantly telling the truth. "Dad, I do not want to get her in trouble, but I know what I saw." The room tightened around me. I could feel the walls closest to my shoulders feel the air growing heavier with each breath my father took. He ordered me back to my bedroom. Megan followed closely behind him. The moment he opened my closet and began tossing things out, I knew he had already decided I was guilty. He searched everything. My drawers, my backpack, my jewelry box, even the lining of my pillowcase. Nothing. He found nothing because nothing was there. But the absence of evidence only made him angrier. He tore the sheets from my mattress and threw them at my feet. Megan leaned against the wall, watching, pretending to be heartbroken about the situation. I could see the corner of something shiny peeking out from under her shirt collar. Later, I would realize she had tucked the pawnshop ticket there. She had taken the watch earlier that day and used it to buy herself a designer dress for an upcoming school dance. She had planned everything. Plant suspicion let me take the fall and then cry her way back into favor. When my father finished searching, his breathing was heavy, erratic. His eyes were wild. "If you do not tell me where it is," he said through clenched teeth, "I will make sure you regret it." Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to look up at him. I did not take it. Megan's mask slipped for half a second. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes flashed with something sharp. She whispered loud enough for him to hear. "Dad, she hates this family. She said it last week in the kitchen when you were not home." Maybe she took it because she was angry. My father snapped his attention back to me, fury overtaking reason. That single lie delivered with perfect, trembling sincerity was enough to ignite everything. That was the moment the path toward the storm outside truly began. And deep down, even before he dragged me toward the stairs, I knew I would not be forgiven for something I had not done. Not in that house. Not in that lifetime. The night everything finally broke felt like watching a storm gather in slow motion, even though it all happened within minutes. After searching my room and finding nothing, my father stood there trembling, not with uncertainty, but with a fury that fed on itself. His eyes darted from the empty mattress to the drawer he had ripped out, then to me, as if any second the truth would magically appear and vindicate his anger. Instead, Megan stepped closer behind him, holding her arms around herself in a graceful imitation of fear. She had positioned herself perfectly, always just enough in his line of sight to influence him without appearing involved. "Dad!" She whispered, her voice thin and quivering. Maybe she got rid of it. Maybe she threw it away. She said something was unfair last week. Maybe this is what she meant. The skill in Megan's performance was terrifying. She knew exactly how to shape words so they slid into my father's mind like truth. He spun around so fast, his shoulder hit the corner of my nightstand and knocked it over. The lamp shattered and the room plunged into a dim flicker from the hallway lights. I pressed myself back against the wall. "Dad, please listen to me." I did not take anything. I never touched the watch. He lunged forward, grabbed a handful of my pajama top, and yanked me so hard I stumbled over the fallen drawer. My knees hit the floor with a jolt that sent pain up my legs. Megan gasped dramatically, as if witnessing a tragedy she had not engineered. My father hauled me upright and shoved me into the hallway. I crashed against the railing, the wooden banister digging into my spine. "Tell me where it is." His voice was a roar, even though he was inches from my face. I repeated what I had said 100 times that evening, but my voice felt small, swallowed by the rage filling the air. "I swear I did not take it." Megan spoke up again, her tone trembling beautifully. "Dad, she hates me. She said she could not stand living here anymore. Maybe she took it to get back at us. Does that not sound like something she would do?" That single sentence snapped whatever thread of reason might have remained in him. He turned on me so fast I barely had time to blink. "You hate this family. You hate me. Hate." His breath hit my face in warm alcoholic waves. I shook my head, terrified. "No, I never said that." Megan watched the scene with wide eyes, her hand pressed to her chest in an expertly crafted picture of hurt. I felt my heart sinking as I saw the shift in my father's expression. He believed her completely. He always had. He grabbed my arm again and dragged me down the hallway toward the staircase. My feet slipped on the hardwood as I tried to find my balance. He yanked harder, frustration building with each step. "You think you can steal from me and lie to my face? You think you can disrespect my house?" The entire house seemed to vibrate with his anger. My mother appeared at the bottom of the stairs just as he pulled me down the last few steps. Her hair was tied back loosely. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying or drinking. "What is going on?" Her voice was small, more annoyed than concerned. She looked at my father first, the way she always did, then at Megan, whose face was contorted in a perfect expression of heartbreak. I opened my mouth to beg her to listen, to see me, to stop what was about to happen, but she shut it down instantly. "Emily, what did you do now?" That was all it took. Those words sealed my fate. My father shoved me so hard that I scraped my palms on the floor. He stormed into the living room, pacing like an animal trapped in a cage built of his own rage. Megan lingered near the stairs, watching with careful distance. My mother lowered herself onto the edge of the couch, sighing dramatically as though she were the victim in the room. My father pointed at me, his finger shaking. "You think you can lie your way out of this. You think I do not see who you are, after everything I have given you." I almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it hit me all at once. He had given me fear, bruises, constant blame, and a home where I learned to anticipate danger like a sixth sense. But to him, those things were invisible. He believed his own narrative so completely that anything contradicting it felt like an attack. "I did not take it," I said again, but my voice cracked. Megan stepped forward with a shaky breath. "Dad, please calm down. She is only making it worse." My father turned on me again. His face was red, his jaw clenched. Before I could move, he grabbed the front of my shirt and shoved me toward the front door. My mother stood up, but did not take a single step to intervene. Megan stayed on the stairs, hugging herself. I stumbled across the hardwood, hitting the small table near the entryway. Objects rattled. A picture frame fell to the floor. My father flung the door open. Snow swirled violently outside, blowing into the house in cold gusts. It was as if the storm itself had been waiting for this moment. He grabbed me by the arm and forced me onto the porch. The freezing wind wrapped around me instantly. My skin prickled. My breath caught in my chest. Megan's silhouette hovered behind him, framed by the warm lights of the house. "You do not deserve to stay here. You do not deserve anything." His voice carried over the storm, heavy and final. Then he pushed me out and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. The lock clicked a second later. The sound echoed inside me like a verdict. That was the moment I realized I had never been a daughter to them. I had always been an inconvenience, a scapegoat, an easy sacrifice whenever they needed someone to blame. And now I was alone in the storm. The ambulance lights painted the snow in streaks of red and blue as the paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher, their voices sharp and urgent in the frozen night. I drifted in and out of awareness, the world tilting like a carousel that refused to stop. My skin felt as if it were made of needles. My breath came out in ragged puffs that barely counted as breathing. The paramedic closest to me kept saying, "Stay with us, sweetheart," in a voice that sounded too warm for the cold swallowing me. I remember the smell of antiseptic and the hum of fluorescent lighting when they rushed me into the emergency room. The heat inside the hospital felt violent against my frozen skin. My body shook so hard the blankets rattled on top of me. A nurse pressed warm packs along my legs and arms. Another wrapped my hands carefully, murmuring that my fingers were dangerously pale. A doctor appeared above me, shining a light into my eyes while asking questions I was too numb to answer. How long were you outside? Who were you with? How did this happen? I tried to speak, but the words collapsed into a weak mumble. My throat burned. My teeth would not stop chattering. "She is hypothermic," someone said. "Severe early stage. Keep her awake. Keep her breathing." Their voices overlapped in a blur. At some point, they cut off my wet pajama top and wrapped me in heated blankets until my skin burned and tingled. The contrast between the storm and the warmth felt unreal. It was as if my body could not decide whether to surrender or fight. When the doctor asked again what happened, the image of my father's hand shoving me out the door flashed so vividly that my chest tightened. I told them I slipped outside and the door locked behind me. It was the lie children of abusive parents cling to because the truth feels dangerous. But the doctor paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Honey, these bruises on your arms, did you fall too?" I looked away. The nurse exchanged a glance with her. Then came the words that changed the direction of everything. "We are mandated reporters. We need to notify Child Protective Services." My heart lurched. Panic surged through me. "No, please do not call them. It will make things worse." They did not listen. They could not. The law required them to report suspected abuse, and my body told a story even when I tried not to. While I lay there shaking, wrapped in layers of warm fabric, the storm raging outside felt almost quiet compared to the storm building inside that hospital room. A woman with a clipboard entered later that night. She introduced herself as a CPS investigator named Karen. She pulled up a chair beside my bed, lowered her voice, and asked me to tell her what happened. Not the version I thought I had to say, but the truth. I hesitated, clenching the blanket around me. "If I tell you," I whispered, "will you make me go back there?" She shook her head slowly. "You will not be sent anywhere unsafe." That promise settled inside me like a grain of warmth. For the first time that night, I let myself breathe. I told her pieces of the truth enough that she understood without forcing every detail out of me. I said my father was angry. I said he shoved me outside. I said the door locked, but I did not say he locked it. My body may not have said the words, but the bruises on my arms, the marks on my shoulders, and the pattern of injuries I had accumulated over the years all spoke for me. The doctor handed Karen a file containing previous hospital notes. 2 years earlier, I had come in with a fractured wrist after my father shoved me into a cupboard. At the time, he told the staff I had fallen off my bike. I nodded along because nodding kept the peace. But the doctor that night had written down concerns. Now those concerns had returned with sharper definition. While Karen was reviewing the file, another visitor arrived. Aunt Mary. She burst into the room with eyes wide and frantic, her coat half unbuttoned, snow tangled in her hair. The instant she saw me, she rushed to my side. "Oh, Emily. Oh, sweetheart. What did they do to you?" She held my hand gently, afraid to hurt me. Something inside me broke at her voice. For the first time since the storm, I cried. She brushed my forehead and kissed my knuckles as if trying to replace every wound with tenderness. Karen asked Aunt Mary a series of questions. Had she witnessed abuse? Had she ever worried for my safety? Had she ever reported concerns? Aunt Mary pulled out her phone and showed her a string of texts she had sent my mother over the years. They were messages begging her sister to protect me, messages warning that my father's anger was escalating, messages my mother had responded to with silence or excuses. Karen read them carefully, her expression tightening. It was the first time I saw an adult look at the situation, not with doubt, but with certainty. Karen stood and said she would return after speaking with my parents. My entire body tensed. I imagined my father's fury when he learned strangers were questioning him. I imagined Megan standing behind him pretending to cry while feeding him lines to cover their tracks. But instead of fear, a strange sense of possibility stirred inside me. Maybe this time someone else would see the truth. A police officer entered briefly later on. His questions were direct but gentle. He wanted to confirm what CPS had already documented. When he left, Aunt Mary squeezed my hand again. "He will not hurt you again, not after tonight." Her voice held a firmness that made me want to believe her. Hours later, when my body temperature finally stabilized, Karen returned. She said I would not be going home. She said CPS had grounds to place me in protective care until a custody decision could be made. She said my father had insisted I ran away and that he had no idea why I was lying about him. But she also said my mother had struggled to defend him. She appeared nervous, evasive, and inconsistent in her story. Combined with the medical evidence and Aunt Mary's records, CPS did not believe them. For the first time in my life, someone believed me over them. As I drifted into exhausted sleep, wrapped in hospital blankets and Aunt Mary's steady presence beside me, I realized something unimaginable. I had survived the storm, and now an entirely different kind of storm was about to begin. The custody battle began long before we ever stepped inside a courtroom. It started the moment CPS decided I would not go home and placed me under temporary protective care. For the first 48 hours, I stayed in a quiet room at the hospital while they monitored my temperature and watched for complications. Aunt Mary never left my side. She slept upright in the chair beside my bed, her hands wrapped around mine as if letting go might send me back into the storm. My father called the hospital repeatedly demanding information. My mother left 2 voicemails for the staff insisting this was a misunderstanding and that I needed to come home as soon as possible. Megan, of course, remained silent, hiding behind whatever performance she was undoubtedly preparing for the inevitable investigation. When CPS officially transferred me to a temporary placement with Aunt Mary, my father exploded. I heard his voice through the hallway when Karen tried to update him by phone. He insisted I was lying. He insisted Megan must have confused her memories. He insisted that he had been searching for me all night. He insisted he was a victim of disobedience and runaway behavior. Karen listened without reacting, which only enraged him further. She explained calmly that a court hearing would determine my long-term placement and that the evidence strongly suggested I could not safely return home. He threatened to sue to expose CPS for targeting innocent parents to take this to the news. Karen remained unmoved. The morning of the hearing, Aunt Mary helped me dress in a soft sweater and clean jeans she had bought the night before. She braided my hair gently, telling me I looked beautiful and brave. My stomach felt like it was tied in knots. The courthouse was cold, echoing with footsteps and murmured conversations that felt too large for my small, shaken body. In the waiting area outside the courtroom, I saw my parents. My mother sat rigidly in her chair, her purse clutched so tightly her knuckles were white. My father paced in sharp, angry lines, hurling glares at anyone who dared look at him. Megan sat between them wearing a pale pink blouse and a perfectly rehearsed expression of worry. When her eyes met mine, she tilted her head slightly, as if we were sharing some private conflict between sisters, as if she were a wounded participant in a tragedy instead of its architect. My father saw me and immediately marched toward us. Karen stepped between us before he could get too close. "Robert, you need to wait until the judge calls the case." He tried to look around her at me. "Emily, tell them what you told me last night. Tell them you overreacted. Tell them you were emotional and scared. Tell them you want to come home." In that moment, I felt the old instinct rising in me, the instinct to fold, to shrink, to say whatever would make the storm pass. But Aunt Mary rested her hand on my shoulder, anchoring me. I lifted my chin. I cannot go back. My father's face contorted with fury, but Karen guided him back behind the line, marking the seating area. When the courtroom doors opened, we filed inside. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and clear eyes, watched each of us closely as we took our seats. The hearing began with statements from CPS. Karen presented the medical report documenting my hypothermia, the bruises, and my previous injury that had raised concern years earlier. She showed the texts Aunt Mary had sent my mother warning about escalating abuse. She described my father's conflicting stories about the night he locked me out. She explained that Megan's statement did not align with physical evidence or timelines. My father's attorney argued loudly that families have disagreements and that I had exaggerated events. He claimed I had a rebellious streak. He suggested I had run outside during an argument. He suggested that teenagers misinterpret discipline as abuse. But the judge interrupted him. "Sir, hypothermia does not come from misunderstanding." Her words hit him harder than I expected. My father stiffened his jaw, clenching. Then the judge asked to hear from me. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my own voice, but I forced myself to speak. I told her the truth. Not everything. Not the worst parts. Just the truth of that night and the pattern that had led to it. I told her I was afraid. I told her I had been afraid for years. My voice cracked and Aunt Mary squeezed my hand. When the judge asked if I wanted to return home, I shook my head. No. I want to stay with Aunt Mary. My father shot up from his chair. This is outrageous. She is manipulating her. That woman has been poisoning her against us for years. Security approached, instantly motioning for him to sit. He slammed himself back into his seat, muttering under his breath. Then the judge turned to Megan. "Young lady, you stated on record that you saw your sister in the office the week the watch went missing. Is that true?" Megan's eyes filled with tears on command. "Yes, I saw her." She looked at me with trembling lips as if she were heartbroken to say it. The judge's gaze sharpened. "But testimony indicates you were at a friend's house overnight for most of that week." Megan blinked, stunned for a moment before trying to recover. "I went home early that day." The judge did not look convinced. My mother testified next. Her voice was flat. She said she was overwhelmed. She said she did not know things had gotten so bad. She said she believed we all needed therapy. She said she wanted me home. But the judge watched her for a long time as if studying a painting for cracks. When all testimony was finished, the judge folded her hands and delivered the decision. "Emily will remain in the care of her Aunt Mary. Full guardianship will be granted pending final review." My father exploded again. Megan's tears dried instantly. My mother stared at the table as though avoiding eye contact might erase the truth. And I sat there, overwhelmed and shaking, realizing that for the first time in my life, a door had opened instead of closed. The first morning I woke up in Aunt Mary's house felt like stepping into a world I did not recognize. The silence was different, gentle, instead of threatening, holding no hidden tension or footsteps waiting to turn violent. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, warming the room in a way I had never experienced at home. I lay there for a long minute, listening to the sounds of a quiet kitchen clinking mugs and the faint whistle of the kettle. For the first time in years, my heart did not jump at every noise. When I walked into the kitchen, Aunt Mary smiled with soft relief, as if seeing me safe still felt like a small miracle. She made breakfast eggs and toast with a slice of orange on the side, and even though the meal was simple, it felt like a feast. I kept waiting for the yelling, the accusations, the cold glare of suspicion. None of it came. Instead, she asked me how I slept and if my hands were still sore from the cold. I nodded, unsure how to accept kindness without flinching. Healing, I soon learned, was not a straight line. CPS had arranged therapy for me, and although the idea terrified me at first, the therapist Dr. Cohen spoke gently, giving me space to choose my words rather than pulling them out of me. During our first session, she asked me to describe what safety felt like. The question made me freeze. I had no answer, so we started with smaller questions. What scares you? What memories do you avoid? What do you wish you could forget? She helped me understand that fear had been my default setting for so long that I needed time to relearn my own reactions. I cried often unexpectedly, sometimes in the middle of school assignments, sometimes when brushing my hair, sometimes when nothing had happened at all. Trauma was sneaky like that. It surfaced in mundane places and ordinary moments, reminding me that the storm was still settling inside me even after I had escaped the house where it started. Returning to school was its own battlefield. It felt strange walking through the hallways without carrying the invisible weight of anticipating what waited for me at home. People stared at first. Rumors had spread that I had been hospitalized, that CPS had stepped in, that I was living with my aunt. No one knew the specifics, but teenagers always sense when a story sits just beneath the surface, too uncomfortable to name. I kept my head down. I focused on my classes. And slowly, small things began to shift. I had always been good at school, but now my mind had room to breathe. I was not worrying about the next explosion of anger or whether Megan had planted another story against me. Studying became something I could do without trembling. I began to raise my hand in class. Teachers who had once barely noticed me now paused to compliment my work. I even joined the STEM club after a teacher suggested I might enjoy the puzzles and engineering challenges. At first, I hesitated. Participating in anything felt dangerous, as though shining too brightly might attract the wrong kind of attention. But Aunt Mary encouraged me gently. Try it for one meeting. If you hate it, you never have to go back. I agreed reluctantly, and to my surprise, I loved it. Building small robots, solving mechanical problems, and working with my hands made me feel grounded. The club advisor, a kind man named Mr. Chandler, often said I had a natural engineering mind. No one had ever said I was naturally good at anything. I held on to those words like a lifeline. At home, Aunt Mary created routines that made my world feel stable for the first time. She insisted I rest. She insisted I eat proper meals. She insisted I talk to her whenever something felt heavy. Sometimes I resisted her warmth because part of me was convinced it would disappear, that at any moment she would grow tired of me and push me away the way my parents had. But every time I tested her patience, she responded with gentleness instead of anger. "You are allowed to feel safe here," she told me once when I apologized for accidentally dropping a plate. "You are allowed to be human without fear." Those words nestled inside me, slowly rewriting the beliefs I had carried for so long. At school, my progress continued. I won a regional science award. My essay on mechanical systems received recognition. For the first time, people noticed me for something other than being Megan's sister. But even as I excelled, shadows lingered. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night, certain I could hear my father's boots in the hallway. Sometimes I panicked when someone raised their voice near me, even if they were laughing. Traumatic echoes lived inside my bones. Therapy helped, but healing was a slow unraveling. What fueled me most during that time was something deeper than fear. It was a fierce determination to build a life that would never again depend on people who saw me as disposable. Education became my escape route. Every test I passed, every project I completed, every skill I learned felt like a brick in the wall separating me from the house I came from. Aunt Mary celebrated each success as if it were her own. She hung my certificates on the fridge. She baked small cakes when I earned straight A grades. She reminded me that I was becoming someone powerful, someone capable, someone worthy. Yet one memory lingered, haunting me more than any bruise. It was the last words my father had spoken as he shoved me into the snow. "You do not deserve anything." Those words burned into my mind like frostbite. Whenever I struggled, they resurfaced. Whenever I doubted myself, they whispered. But something else whispered too, something quieter, but stronger. Aunt Mary's promise. One day you will get out of that house, and you will not look back. As high school progressed, that promise began to feel real. My life was not perfect. I was not healed. But I was alive, I was safe, and I was building something that no storm could take from me. I was becoming someone new, someone who would never again let others define her worth. College became the gateway between who I had been and who I was determined to become. When the acceptance letter arrived with the words "full scholarship" printed across the top, Aunt Mary cried. First, then laughed, then cried again. I stood there holding the envelope, stunned by the possibility that my future no longer depended on surviving someone else's rage. The engineering program I had been accepted into was competitive, demanding, and exactly what I wanted. On the day we packed the car, Aunt Mary tucked a handwritten note into my backpack. "You deserve every good thing coming your way." Those words stayed with me through the entire drive to campus. When I stepped into my dorm room for the first time, the world felt too big, too open, almost frightening in its freedom. I had spent so many years navigating danger that safety felt unfamiliar. But as the days passed, I learned to breathe in the new rhythm of life. I woke without bracing myself for shouting. I walked across campus without flinching at sudden noises. I studied in the library surrounded by quiet diligence instead of chaos. My professors were demanding but fair. They pushed us to build, design, think, and question. The challenge ignited something in me. I poured myself into engineering with a hunger that surprised even me. I worked late in the labs, soldering circuits and sketching mechanical systems until my hands were stained with pencil, graphite, and resin. For the first time, effort transformed into opportunity instead of punishment. I also worked part-time at the campus bookstore to support myself. The job gave me structure and independence. I learned how to manage money, how to budget, how to trust that I could take care of myself. Aunt Mary checked in constantly but never smothered me. She let me grow without fear, offering advice only when I asked. Through college, I made friends cautiously. Trauma taught me to observe before trusting, and while most people seemed genuine, I always held a layer of distance until I was sure. Eventually, I grew close to a small group in the engineering program who appreciated my work ethic more than my history. With them, I laughed more freely than I had in years. Sometimes I caught myself enjoying life so much that guilt crept in, as though I were betraying the version of me who once believed comfort was impossible. I learned in therapy that guilt was a normal response to escaping pain. Healing required giving myself permission to experience joy without apology. During my junior year, an internship at a major design firm opened a new door. I worked under a senior engineer named Alex who challenged me with projects I never thought I could handle. He treated me like a professional, not a fragile survivor. He pushed me to experiment, revise, and think beyond limitations. By the end of the internship, I had contributed to a prototype that the company later patented. They offered me a full-time job after graduation. When I told Aunt Mary, she clapped her hands together and said she had never doubted this moment would come. Graduation itself felt surreal. As I walked across the stage and accepted my diploma, my chest swelled with a sense of reclamation. I had taken everything I should never have survived and turned it into fuel. I was no longer defined by the house that shoved me into a snowstorm. I was defined by the choices I made after. After graduation, I moved into a small apartment near the company's headquarters. It was not fancy, but it was mine. The first night, I stood in the empty living room and listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the place. No shouting, no footsteps, no fear. Just peace. I invited Aunt Mary to move in with me a few months later after she mentioned her apartment lease was ending. She hesitated at first, but I insisted. "You saved my life," I told her. "Let me give you something back." Living with her as an adult felt different from living with her as a terrified teenager. We cooked dinner together, watched movies on weekends, and talked about everything from work stress to future plans. She never tried to replace my parents. She simply stood where they had disappeared, offering support without conditions. At 25, my career accelerated faster than I expected. I worked overtime, volunteered for difficult assignments, and earned the respect of engineers who had been in the field for decades. When I received a promotion to project lead, I stared at the email for nearly 5 minutes before I could process it. It felt like a chapter marker in my life, a milestone that proved I had climbed out of the shadow of survival and into a future I had built with my own hands. With a stable income, I finally allowed myself to think about long-term goals. I saved, aggressively researched real estate, and studied financial planning. When I purchased my first house at 28, I walked through the front door holding the keys with trembling hands. Aunt Mary followed behind me, smiling proudly. This house was not just a home, it was a declaration, a rejection of the past, a foundation for everything I wanted my life to stand on. And though I had gained strength, independence, and stability, one wound still lingered beneath all the layers of healing. My father's final words the night he threw me into the snow still lived in the back of my mind. "You do not deserve anything." For years, those words had dug themselves into my skin like ice. They had shaped my fears, my doubts, my hesitation to accept joy. But with every accomplishment, every step forward, every piece of the life I built, Those words began to lose their power. I was building a future so solid that not even his cruelty could tear it apart. I was not done healing. Trauma does not vanish simply because success arrives, but I was no longer living in reaction to my past. I was living toward my future. My father resurfaced in my life the way old nightmares do without warning and with a force that made the air feel heavier. I was 32, settling into a version of adulthood I had built piece by piece with stubborn determination. My career was steady, my home felt safe, and Aunt Mary's presence filled the rooms with a kind of warmth I had never known growing up. Then, one evening as I pulled into my driveway after a long day of work, I saw a figure sitting on the front porch steps. At first, I thought he might be a neighbor or a delivery driver, but as soon as the porch light illuminated his face, my stomach dropped. My father stood slowly, older than I remembered, thinner, his clothes wrinkled and stained as though he had been wearing them for days. His eyes flicked toward me with a mix of entitlement and desperation. The sight of him stirred something deep in my chest. Part fear, part disbelief, part anger I had buried for 16 years. "Emily," he said, stepping forward as if I should welcome him. "You look successful. You must be doing well." His tone suggested I owed him credit for my achievements. I kept my distance, gripping my bag tighter. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged as though the answer should have been obvious. "I need a place to stay for a while. Things have been rough." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "You owe me that much." The words slammed into me like a memory I never asked to relive. "You owe me." He had used that line constantly when I was a child, insisting my existence was a debt, that any ounce of care he provided was a burden. I stepped back. "I do not owe you anything." His eyes narrowed. "That temper of yours," he muttered, shaking his head. "Always dramatic, always making yourself the victim." He tried to brush past me toward the door, but I moved quickly and blocked him. "You are not coming inside. Not now. Not ever." The surprise on his face was almost comical. He was not used to resistance. He was not used to me having a voice. His confusion shifted into irritation. "I am your father," he snapped as if the title alone granted him ownership. "Family sticks together. You cannot turn me away." I met his gaze steadily. "Family does not throw their child into a blizzard and lock the door." He blinked, caught off guard by the directness. Then he laughed a brittle sound. "You still on about that? That was years ago. You ran outside on your own. I tried to help you, but you were hysterical." His ability to rewrite reality so effortlessly sent a chill through me. But I was no longer a child who questioned her own memory. I was a grown woman with proof, with therapy, with strength. "No," I said firmly. "I remember exactly what happened." His expression hardened. "Look, I am not here to argue. I just need a place to stay. A roof, a bed, some food." He waved a hand dismissively. "You have plenty. I have nothing right now." "You can help me get back on my feet." My voice stayed steady. "No." He scoffed, frustration boiling beneath his skin. "So it is like that. You are too good for your own family now, thinking you are some big shot." I felt a flicker of the old fear, the instinct to shrink, but it passed like a cloud. "I am protecting myself," I said. "Something you never did for me." He stepped closer. "If you do not let me in, I will make this difficult. I will go to your work. I will tell them you are unstable. I will tell the world you lied about me." His threats once would have shattered me, but now they only revealed how little power he had left. I took my phone from my bag. "If you do not leave right now, I will call the police." He stared at the phone, stunned, as though the possibility had never occurred to him. "You would not dare. Try me." My voice did not waver. He hesitated, glancing from my face to the porch door and back. Then he spit on the ground, muttered something under his breath, and stepped away. "This is not over," he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I will be back." Then he walked toward the street, disappearing into the shadows. I waited until he was gone before unlocking my door. My hands trembled not with fear, but with the enormity of what I had done. I had stood up to the man who once convinced me that I deserved nothing. Inside, Aunt Mary looked up from the kitchen table, concern flooding her features. "Emily, what happened?" I sank into the chair beside her. My father showed up. She exhaled sharply and reached for my hand. I knew this day might come. Are you all right? Yes, I said, surprising myself with the truth. I handled it. Later that night, as I sat alone in my living room, the quiet felt different than usual. It held the echo of confrontation and the strength of boundaries I had never imagined setting. I knew he might try again. I knew Megan might return with her manipulative charm. I knew my mother might emerge with soft apologies and empty promises. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer accessible to them. I was no longer a child they could twist into submission. I was the architect of my own life, and I would not let them rewrite a single piece of it. Not now. Not ever again. Megan reached out 2 days after our father appeared at my house, and the timing alone told me everything I needed to know. Her message came through late in the evening while I was reviewing reports for work, a simple line that might have sounded caring to someone who did not know her history. Hey, Em, I heard Dad stopped by. Are you okay? The sight of her name on my screen triggered the familiar tightness in my chest, but after years of therapy and growth, the sensation faded quickly. Still, I did not respond right away. I let the message sit there because I knew Megan well enough to understand that silence would make her anxious and anxiety always pushed her into revealing more than she intended. 10 minutes later, another message. I know things are complicated, but we are still family. We should talk. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Megan had spent 16 years backing up every lie our father told, protecting him whenever he hurt me and shifting blame in whatever direction kept her out of trouble. Yet here she was, trying to revive a connection she had spent years destroying. I typed back slowly, each word calculated. I am fine. What do you want? Her reply was almost immediate, which told me she had been waiting with her phone in hand. I just want to check in. Dad is not doing great lately. He has been acting strange. I think he needs help. A normal person might have read concern in her words, but I heard something different. Fear, anxiety, something pressing down on her. That was my first clue. I leaned into it. Strange how. Megan hesitated, or at least her typing bubble flickered in and out long enough to suggest hesitation. He has been talking about the past a lot, she finally wrote. About the watch. About you. About that night. My heart tightened for a moment, but I forced myself to remain calm. What about the watch? Her typing bubble appeared again. Stopped, appeared again, like she was weighing how much she should reveal. I think he is realizing he might not have had the full story back then. It is stressing him out. I almost smiled. There it was, the worry beneath the surface, the fear that the truth she buried might crawl into the light. I texted back something intentionally vague. Interesting. Megan's panic came through instantly. Did he say anything to you? Did he accuse anyone? Did he mention me? I paused long enough to let her stew, then wrote. He did not mention names, but he seems convinced someone lied to him. Megan sent a string of messages, each one shorter and more frantic than the last. What do you mean? Who told him that? Did someone talk to him? Did he remember something? Each question revealed more fear, more guilt, more instability. I decided to push gently the way Aunt Mary taught me to handle manipulative people. What are you afraid he remembers? A full minute passed without a response. Then Megan sent a long message that did not quite answer the question. Dad is getting worse. He is paranoid. He is angry all the time. I think he is losing it, and honestly, I am worried he will take it out on me if someone feeds him the wrong idea. That line was the closest thing to honesty I had ever seen from her. She was not worried about the truth. She was worried about consequences. I softened my tone to draw her in. You can tell me if something happened. We are adults now. I am not going to hurt you. Another pause. Then she tried a different angle. Emily, we should not fight anymore. We were kids. Things were complicated. Let us fix things. Let us start fresh. That attempt at sisterhood would have sounded touching to anyone who did not know her history, but to me, it was another tactic. She needed something. I just had to figure out what. I replied, What exactly do you want from me? She answered, I want us to work together. Dad listens to you more now. Maybe you can help calm him down. Maybe you can explain things. Tell him you never blamed any of us." The words lit up every alarm in my head. She needed me to take the weight off her shoulders. She wanted me to fix something she broke. I played along, careful not to show my hand. Calm him down about what? She dodged at first. About everything. About the past. About the watch. I pushed harder. Why the watch? Why does that matter? Her bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then a confession slipped through. Not the full truth, but enough to keep unraveling the rope she had tried so hard to hold together. "Because he has been muttering about it non-stop," Megan wrote. "He keeps saying someone betrayed him, someone lied to him, someone ruined everything for our family." Then she added, "If he thinks it was me, he will destroy me." That line shattered the facade entirely. She was terrified that the blame would finally land where it belonged. I typed, "If you did not do anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about." She took the bait. "Emily, please," she wrote. "You know how he is. If he gets the wrong idea, it will not matter what the truth is. He will just pick someone to punish. And it will be me this time." The irony of her fear tasted sharp on my tongue. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to be disposable. I decided to push her 1 inch further. "So, what is the truth? And what exactly are you afraid he will find out?" The pause that followed stretched nearly 5 minutes. When her message came through, it was shorter than I expected, but heavy as a stone. "I just need to know that you are not going to let him blame me." That was not an answer. It was a plea. I typed slowly, letting each word tighten the noose. "Tell me the truth, and I will tell you what I can do." She hesitated again. Then the bubble appeared, and stayed, before disappearing once more. She was close, cornered, panicking, and all I had to do was wait. Megan finally broke the silence the next morning, long after I assumed she had given up or convinced herself to retreat back into denial, and her message popped onto my screen while I was stirring creamer into my coffee before work. "Emily, can we please talk for a second?" I did not respond immediately because silence had become my most powerful tool with her. The longer I waited, the more her panic grew, the more her fear did the work for me. After 3 minutes, another message came through. "I did not sleep at all last night. Dad was pounding around the house yelling at walls. He said someone ruined his life and he would not rest until he figured out who really did it." My stomach tightened at the memory of him roaring through the hallway when I was a child, but this time the fear was gone. I only felt distance, control. So I typed back short and neutral. "What did he say exactly?" Megan's response came instantly, like she had been gripping her phone all night. "He said he was done being lied to. He said he should have trusted his instincts. He said he kicked out the wrong person." The wrong person. My breath stilled for a second. Even after all these years, hearing that phrase stung, but not in the old way. It felt like validation, like the universe finally echoing what I always knew, but no one had ever admitted. I typed, "So, who does he think lied?" The typing bubble flickered and vanished, then returned. "I do not know. That was a lie. Megan always knew." I waited another minute, giving her time to sweat. When she stayed silent, I sent a gentle nudge. "Megan, what are you afraid he remembers?" That question hit her spine like ice water. The typing bubble appeared again, and for a moment I thought she might disappear completely. Then a long message arrived. "Look, you do not understand how things were back then. Dad was insane about that stupid watch. He said it was the only thing he had left from his father. He acted like it was worth more than us. He would lose his mind if anything happened to it. So when it went missing, I panicked. My pulse slowed. This was it. The beginning of the unraveling." I waited, saying nothing. Megan continued. "I knew he would blame me. He always expected me to be perfect. I could not let him think I messed up before prom." I asked, "What did you do?" Another long pause. Then the confession cracked open. "I sold the watch." My breath caught even though I already knew. She wrote, "I needed the money. I wanted the prom dress everyone else had. Dad said no because it was too expensive. My friends were all getting hair appointments and new shoes. I did not want to be the embarrassment who showed up looking cheap. I watched the words spill onto the screen like a dam bursting. Then she added the line that sealed her fate. I thought I could replace the money before he noticed. Then I realized how much it was worth and I freaked out. So I blamed you. Each sentence struck with a clarity that felt almost surreal. She admitted it. She confessed the theft. She confessed the lie. She confessed condemning me to years of abuse. I kept my breathing steady and typed. So you framed me. Megan typed back immediately. I did not think he would actually throw you out. I thought he would just yell at you, ground you something normal. I did not know he would go that far. That was another lie. She knew exactly what he was capable of. She had spent her entire life protected from the consequences of his rage because he always had me to absorb them. But I wrote, "Why did you let it go on for years? Why not say something?" Her reply was sharp with defensiveness. Because Dad never calmed down. Because once he decided something was true, there was no undoing it. Because he was easier to keep happy if you were the one taking the blame. That sentence might have been the closest thing to honesty she had ever spoken. I felt something close to pity rise in me, but I crushed it quickly. Pity was how she won before. Not this time. I typed, "So you let me get thrown out into the cold. You watched them tear my life apart." Megan wrote in shaky digital ink, "I was a kid. I made a mistake that nearly killed me." My hands hovered above the keyboard for a moment, steady and firm. Then I asked the final question. "Do you take responsibility for what you did?" The typing bubble blinked for a long time before her message arrived. "Yes, I did it. It was my fault. I should have confessed back then. I ruined everything." I saved the entire thread, scrolled back to the beginning screenshot, every message in clear chronological order, saved them to cloud storage, backed them up onto my desktop, and emailed them to myself so nothing could ever be deleted or lost. Then I locked my phone and sat in silence, letting the weight of the moment settle. For 16 years, no one had ever spoken the truth out loud. For 16 years, I carried the guilt of someone else's crime. For 16 years, I believed I had deserved the pain thrust on me. But now I had her confession in her own words. Megan sent another message a minute later. "Emily, please tell me you are not going to tell him. I know he will come after me if he finds out. Please do not ruin my life." I stared at her pleading words, the same sister who once watched me shiver on the porch while snow gathered on my bare feet. Then I typed the final line that would set the next stage in motion. "I will do what I think is right." I waited 24 hours before sending the screenshots to my father, not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted the timing to cut through his life like a blade. Late evening always worked on him. That was when his temper simmered without boiling over, when silence gnawed at him more violently than shouting ever did. At 7:43 p.m., I attached the full confession Megan had sent, every timestamp visible, every sentence preserved, and I wrote only 3 words. "You should see this." I turned my phone face down after pressing send, but I did not need to watch the screen to know what would happen. The storm would hit Megan first, and then it would pull the entire Riley family into the vortex it spent 16 years avoiding. The next morning, a message arrived from a number I did not have saved. "Family meeting tonight, 7 o'clock. Your mother's house." It was signed only with a single initial R. I stared at it for a long moment before replying with nothing at all. I already knew I would go. Some moments demand witnesses. When I pulled up to my mother's house that evening, the driveway looked like a battlefield waiting for soldiers. My father's truck dented and rusted along the wheel. Will sat crooked near the mailbox. Megan's white sedan was parked too close to the curb, like she had swung into the spot trembling. My mother's aging SUV was in its usual place, the car of a woman who tried to look stable even when everything around her was crumbling. I walked inside without knocking. The living room was silent, except for the low hum of the old floor fan. My mother sat stiffly on one end of the couch, hands clasped together like she was attending a funeral. Megan was in the armchair, makeup smudged her face pale, her knee bouncing in frantic jolts. My father stood in the center of the room in front of the coffee table where his laptop was open, bright screen displaying something I could not yet see. They all turned when I entered. Megan's eyes widened in a look that begged and accused at the same time. What is she doing here? She asked the question like I was an intruder, but my father cut her off. Sit down. His voice was low, controlled, and edged with something dangerous. I did not sit. I stayed near the doorway and crossed my arms. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I could not decipher, then turned his laptop toward the room. On the screen was Megan's confession, the entire message thread arranged neatly. Megan's breathing quickened. Dad, wait. I told you she misinterpreted what I wrote. Dad closed the laptop with a calmness that scared everyone in the room. Want to explain this? Megan stood up, then sat back down as if her legs forgot how to function. Dad, please, you do not understand. It was not like that. He raised a hand and she froze. Megan Riley, you sent every word of this. I made you show me the thread on your phone. You verified the timestamps. You verified the number. That leaves only one reality. You lied. Megan swallowed hard eyes darting toward Mom. Mom looked down at her lap as if hoping no one noticed her. Dad stepped closer to Megan. You lied to me for 16 years. She shook her head desperately. Dad, I was 17. I panicked. I was scared. You always pushed me so hard and you yelled so much, and I thought if you found out I made one mistake, you would hate me forever. I thought you would not trust me anymore. I thought you would hurt me. Dad leaned forward, his voice quiet enough to freeze the air. So, you blamed your sister. You let me believe something that destroyed her life. You watched me throw a child out into the snow. You let me do it. Megan started crying, but it was the frantic kind meant to shift sympathy, not the kind that comes from accountability. Dad, she said softly, please, you were so angry back then. You terrified me. I thought if I told the truth you would explode. He stepped even closer. You let her take the beating meant for you, and then you let the lie sit for 16 years. You got prom. You got college. You got my money. And she got thrown out. Megan sucked in a shaking breath. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I never meant for everything to get this bad. I never thought you would actually kick her out. That was the wrong thing to say. My father's face hardened into something carved out of stone. You expect me to believe that. You expect me to believe you did not know what I was capable of. You grew up in that house. You knew exactly what would happen. Megan covered her face with her hands and sobbed. But he was not finished. He turned slowly toward my mother. And you. Mom jerked as if struck. Me. Yes, you. You stood there and watched. You saw everything. You knew this story did not make sense. You let a child be thrown into 5-degree weather in a nightgown and you did nothing. My mother began to cry, her voice small and panicked. Robert, please, I did not know what to do. You were so angry and I was afraid to get in the middle of it. He stared at her as if she were a stranger. Then he turned back to Megan. Let me be very clear. I am rewriting my will tomorrow morning. You are both out. Megan choked on a sob. Dad, please, no. I cannot start over. I have nothing. I cannot do this alone. He raised his voice slightly, and the sound cut through the room like a blade. You should have thought about that 16 years ago. There was a long moment when no one spoke. Megan shook uncontrollably. My mother silently cried, shoulders trembling. My father turned to me. His voice cracked. I am sorry, Emily. I believed the wrong child. I trusted the wrong daughter. I ruined your life because I listened to a lie. For the first time in years, his face showed true remorse, but it did not matter. My healing had never depended on him. I said nothing. I did not need to. Megan looked at me with desperation twisting her features. Emily, help me. Tell him not to do this. I stared at her and felt nothing. 16 years of pain washed clean by the clarity of this moment. No, I said, and the word echoed through the room like a closing door. I thought the confrontation at my mother's house would be the final collapse of Megan's power, the moment she finally accepted that her lies had reached their end. But the truth about people like my sister is that they do not go quietly. They claw for control even when drowning, convinced that if they make enough noise, someone will rush in to save them. 2 days after the confrontation, while I was at work reviewing blueprints for a new robotics assembly system, my phone buzzed with a message from my manager, Daniel. Can you stop by my office when you have a minute? My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with an instinctive awareness of Megan's fingerprints. I walked down the hallway, steady and composed, and stepped inside Daniel's office. He gestured toward a chair, his expression calm but concerned. "We received a call," he said slowly. "Someone claiming to be your sister." I exhaled through my nose, unsurprised. What did she say? Daniel adjusted his glasses and read from a notepad. "She claimed you fabricated your past abuse for attention. She claimed she has proof you lied about everything. She implied you were emotionally unstable and might be a liability to the company." He lowered the notepad. "I am guessing this has something to do with your father showing up here last week." That small detail made sense. Megan must have assumed Dad came to my workplace because he mentioned wanting to see where I worked. She jumped to conclusions and used them as ammunition. I met Daniel's eyes. "My sister is trying to retaliate because a major family truth came out this week. Everything she told you is a lie." Daniel nodded. "That was our assumption, too. HR looked through your employee file, and there has never been a single concern complaint or incident. You have stellar reviews. You were promoted twice in 3 years. None of this aligns with what she said." Still, he added, "HR has to follow protocol. They would like to speak with you this afternoon if you are available." I nodded. "Of course." I walked out of his office feeling strangely calm. Megan had always underestimated me, assuming I would panic or crumble under pressure just because she had succeeded in destroying me once. But she did not realize something vital adults have paper trails. HR scheduled the meeting for 2:30. When I stepped inside the conference room, the director of human resources, a woman named Patrice, greeted me with a professional smile. "Emily, thank you for meeting with us. We just need clarification so we can close this out." I sat down, hands steady, back straight. I told them everything necessary but nothing excessive. My father threw me out when I was 16. I was hospitalized with hypothermia. CPS was involved. My aunt gained custody. There is official documentation if you need it. Patrice nodded, taking notes. "And your sister?" "Megan has a long history of manipulating our father and shifting blame. She confessed 2 days ago to framing me for something that led to the entire incident. She is currently trying to avoid accountability. I have written records of that confession if the company requires verification." Patrice raised her eyebrows. "You have that?" "Yes." She exhaled softly. "That should not be necessary. We only needed to hear your side so we could dismiss the complaint as malicious. Your work performance and professionalism speak for themselves. We are closing the matter." Her smile softened. "And for what it is worth, I am sorry you had to go through that as a child." The compassion in her voice made something tighten unexpectedly in my throat, but I swallowed the emotion and thanked her. As I returned to my workstation, the empowerment settled in my chest. Megan's influence had evaporated. No one believed her anymore. And more importantly, no one feared her. That afternoon, Megan texted me. "What did you tell them?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Nothing. You did not create yourself." She responded instantly, "Emily, you are ruining my life. He is cutting me out of everything. I have bills. I have rent. I need help." I let the phone rest on my desk before replying. "The truth ruined your life, not me." She sent another message. "Please do not be like this. We are sisters." That word scraped against me. Sisters implied shared trust, shared struggle, shared loyalty. Megan and I had shared none of those things. I wrote, "I owe you nothing." Megan tried once more. "Can I at least come over? Can we talk in person?" I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. No. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as Megan's voice cracked through the speaker, wavering between manipulation and desperation. "Emily, I know you are angry, but I need you. Dad said if I am not out by Friday, he is changing the locks. I do not have anywhere to go. You have a house. You have room. Please." I deleted the message without responding. That evening, when I pulled into my driveway, I saw a familiar sedan parked across the street. Megan stepped out before I had even closed my car door. She looked disheveled, mascara-streaked hair, tangled like she had been pulling at it. "Emily, please," she said. I stepped onto the porch without slowing. Megan followed me to the edge of the steps. I do not have money for a deposit anywhere. My friends will not take me in. Mom is pretending she cannot hear her phone. I need help. You know what Dad is like. He is losing it. If he fully turns on me, I will have nothing. This was the moment she had waited 16 years to avoid, and there she stood trembling on my porch, the same way I had once trembled outside our childhood home. I looked at her with a clarity so sharp it felt like standing in clean winter air. You had no problem watching that happen to me. Her face crumpled. I was scared. So was I. I reached the door and placed my hand on the knob. Emily, please, do not leave me out here. I turned back to her, my expression calm and unshaken. I am not doing to you what was done to me. I am simply choosing not to save you from the consequences you created. Then I stepped inside and closed the door, letting the lock click into place with a finality that echoed in the quiet hallway. For weeks after Megan appeared on my porch, trembling and desperate, the echoes of her pleas lingered in my mind. Not because I felt guilt or conflict, but because the entire scene mirrored a nightmare I once lived through. Only this time I was not the one shivering in the cold, begging for mercy from a door that would never open. This time I was the one choosing silence, choosing distance, choosing myself. The days that followed unfolded with an eerie quietness, as if the storm that had torn through our family finally exhausted itself and collapsed into stillness. Then the letters began. The first envelope showed up on a Thursday afternoon, addressed in my father's handwriting, a handwriting I once associated with detention slips and notes sent to school claiming I was a troublemaker. I held the envelope for a full minute before opening it. The paper inside was lined torn from one of those yellow legal pads he always kept on the kitchen table. Emily, it began. I know you have every reason not to want to hear from me. I know I was wrong. I know I failed you. I know I cannot undo what happened. But I am trying now. I am trying to be better. I hope someday you can sit down with me so we can talk. I want to understand who you became. I want to know the woman you are. I want a chance to make amends. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it face down on the counter. There was a time when those words, or something resembling them, might have cracked my heart open. But now they felt like a stranger's apology delivered too late to a door that no longer led anywhere. The next letter came a week later, this one from my mother. Hers was shorter, neater, carefully constructed to avoid responsibility. Emily, families fall apart sometimes, but we are still family. We love you. We miss you. Your father regrets what happened. Megan does too. We all want a chance to fix things. Please do not shut us out forever. I set her letter beside the first one and walked away from both. The third letter came from Megan herself, though I recognized her shaky handwriting immediately and nearly tossed it without reading. Curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. Emily, I know you hate me right now, but I am not the same person I was. I panicked back then. I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. I am trying to fix my life, but Dad cutting me out has ruined everything. I cannot get my apartment back. I cannot pay off my cards. I know you have space. I know you can help. Please do not be cruel. Please do not turn your back on me. Reading her words, something inside me settled like a stone, finally finding the bottom of a river. She still did not understand. She thought this was about revenge. She thought I was punishing her. She thought I was doing what was done to me. But I was not. I was choosing peace. A week later, she arrived in person again, this time at the lab parking lot as I stepped out after a 12-hour shift. Her face was thinner, eyes, darker lips trembling with the panic of someone watching the last safety net split open beneath her. Emily, she said, stepping into my path. Please, just listen. I kept walking toward my car, and she followed, voice rising with every step. I know you think I deserve this, but I was a kid. I was scared. Dad forced us all into corners. He made us compete. He made us lie. We all did what we had to do. You cannot blame me for being a child in a broken house. I stopped beside my car door and looked directly at her. Her breath hitched like she believed for a moment that I might finally soften. Megan, I said with a calmness that surprised even me, I am not seeking revenge. I am not trying to hurt you. I am not trying to destroy your life. I just will not save you from the consequences of your own actions." Her face twisted with frustration. "So that is it. You are just done with us, with all of us." "Yes," I said. "But we are family," she insisted, desperation sharpening her voice. "Family is supposed to forgive. Family is supposed to stay." I unlocked my car and met her eyes one last time. "Family is not a title you inherit. It is a role you earn. And none of you ever earned it." She blinked at me stunned, as if she could not fathom a world where I was no longer accessible, no longer bendable, no longer the girl she once pushed aside in order to thrive. I got into my car and closed the door. Megan slapped her hand weakly against the window, her voice thin and cracking, but I pulled away without looking back. That night, I sat on the couch with Aunt Mary while she knitted a navy scarf, the needles clicking softly. She glanced at me with that quiet knowing she always carried. "You look lighter," she said. I leaned my head on the back of the couch and exhaled. I finally understand that closure is not something they can give me. It is something I can give myself. She nodded. "Forgiveness is not required for peace. Sometimes the closest thing to forgiveness is simply letting go and moving forward." I thought about the letters collecting dust in my drawer. I thought about my father's cracked voice at the family meeting. I thought about Megan's shaking hands on my porch. And I realized something with absolute clarity. I did not hate any of them anymore. Hate requires energy, and I no longer had any to give. What I had instead was stillness, a kind of quiet freedom I had never known. Weeks passed, then months. The letters dwindled. The calls stopped. The silence finally felt like the ending I deserved. One evening, as Aunt Mary and I planted lavender in the backyard, she looked up at the sunset and said, "You built a life they cannot touch anymore." I smiled, dirt on my hands, sunlight on my face. Yes, and for the first time in my life, I believed it. Some stories end with grand gestures or reconciliations wrapped in neat bows, but mine ended slowly, quietly, like a door finally sliding shut after years of being stuck open. It took time for me to understand that healing is not a scene, not a climax, not a breakthrough in a therapist's office. Healing is the accumulation of small choices, the steady refusal to return to the places that once hurt you, the gentle turning of your face toward whatever warmth remains. Months passed, and each day I found myself breathing easier, thinking less about the echoes of my old home, and more about the life I had built with my own hands. I woke in a house filled with peace, a house that did not vibrate with shouting or accusations, a house where footsteps meant safety instead of danger. Aunt Mary would hum in the kitchen every morning as she made tea, the soft melody drifting into the hallway and brushing against the silence in a way that felt like a blessing. On weekends, we would walk along the river trail behind the neighborhood, our shoes crunching over gravel while sunlight filtered through the trees. Sometimes she asked about work. Sometimes she asked nothing at all. The gift of being loved by someone who does not require performance is that conversation becomes optional. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies pulse in the yard, she said quietly, "You know the thing about survival, Emily. You think you survive once. But really you survive over and over. You survive childhood. You survive memory. You survive the moment you realize no apology will ever fix what happened. And you survive by creating something better." I had no answer because she was right. I had survived more than one night in the cold. I had survived the fallout, the silence, the rebuilding. I had survived becoming the version of myself I once believed impossible. I began journaling again, something I abandoned in college when life became too busy. At first, I wrote about work and routines. Then, the entries shifted into reflections on what it meant to finally be safe. I noticed quiet things, subtle things. The way I no longer flinched when someone knocked unexpectedly. The way I no longer apologized for taking up space. The way my voice felt stronger, fuller, steadier when I spoke in meetings or asked for what I needed. Sometimes I thought about Megan standing on my porch, or my father writing letters he knew I would not answer. I wondered if they ever told themselves the truth about what happened. But the remarkable part was realizing I did not need to know. Their growth or lack of growth no longer controlled my peace. My life was not an equation that required their participation. One Sunday morning, while sitting at a cafe downtown, a woman approached me hesitantly. She looked to be in her 50s, her hands shaking slightly as she held a paper cup. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling. "I do not want to intrude, but I heard you speak at the community event last week about overcoming childhood trauma. Your words stuck with me." Her eyes filled with tears. "My daughter went through something similar. I just wanted to say thank you." I had not realized how deeply sharing my story might resonate with others, especially people who carried their own quiet wounds. As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me, not closure, but purpose. That night, I sat down and wrote the message I had spent years trying to find. It was not for my family. It was for anyone who had stood barefoot in the metaphorical snow, shivering while the people who should have protected them shut the door. It was for anyone who had been told they deserved nothing, anyone who believed that lie long enough that it became part of their bones. I wrote, "You are allowed to walk away from blood if blood tried to break you. You are allowed to choose safety over obligation. You are allowed to heal without offering forgiveness to the people who hurt you. You do not owe them access. You do not owe them explanations. You do not owe them the version of yourself that once endured their cruelty. Healing is not about letting them back in. Healing is about understanding you never needed them in the first place." And then I added something I wish someone had said to me when I was 16, barefoot and freezing outside the house that was never really a home. If someone ever told you that you did not deserve love or safety or a future, hear me clearly. They were wrong. I read those sentences over and over, each repetition anchoring the truth deeper inside me, and I realized that surviving was not the end of my story. Surviving was the foundation. The ending was choosing peace, choosing boundaries, choosing myself. The next morning, Aunt Mary found me on the porch with my laptop open and the sunrise painting the sky in quiet gold. She sat beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder. "You look content," she said. "I am," I replied. And for the first time in my life, the words were not hope or wishful thinking. They were truth. The kind you feel in your chest, steady and unshakable. Before it all happened, I thought survival meant escaping. Now I know survival means building something no one can take from you. So if you are listening to my story and you have lived a version of it yourself, I want you to hear this last part clearly. You are not alone. You are not broken. And your story is not over. Share your truth. Claim your peace. Choose your life. It is yours now, all of it.